Good morning, Cybernauts, and welcome back to Cyber Mornings Daily, the show that brings you the latest and greatest in all things cybersecurity.
That's right. We're here to break down the most pressing cyber threats and explain what they mean for you.
So grab your coffee, put on your thinking caps, and get ready for another deep dive into the digital world.
Today, we've got 3 stories that highlight the interconnected nature of cyber risks.
We're talking privacy data breaches and even a little international espionage to keep things interesting.
It's a wild world out there, folks, so let's jump right in.
Our first stop, Silicon Valley, where Google is once again facing scrutiny over its data collection practices.
Haven't they had enough of that already?
Apparently not.
Yeah.
Seems like every other week there's a new headline about Google and privacy.
Well, this time it's a class action lawsuit alleging that Google collected user data even when individuals thought they had opted out.
You mean like when you adjust your privacy settings to limit data collection?
Exactly. The lawsuit revolves around something called Google Analytics for Firebase, or GA4F for short.
GA4F sounds like a sci-fi weapon or something.
It's not quite as exciting as that, but it's still pretty important. GA4F is a tool that many app developers use to track user behavior, analyze app performance, and target ads.
So even if you're careful about your Google account settings, your data might still be collected through GA4F within those apps.
That's the allegation. And to make matters worse, a judge has decided to let the case proceed to trial.
What makes this case so compelling that the judge decided to move forward?
Well, it seems that some internal Google communications suggest the company may not have been entirely transparent about how GA4F collects data.
So they might have been intentionally vague about what data they were gathering and how they were using it.
That's what the lawsuit claims. And if it's true, it could have serious implications for Google and for user privacy.
This isn't Google's first rodeo when it comes to privacy concerns either. Remember the whole incognito mode debacle and the controversies over location tracking?
Yeah, they had their fair share of issues, and this latest lawsuit just adds fuel to the fire.
It makes you wonder how much control we actually have over our data in this digital age.
It's a question we all need to be asking ourselves, especially when we're using apps and services that rely on Google's vast network.
All right, let's move on to a story that hits a little closer to home. This one involves healthcare and, unfortunately, the dark side of cybercrime.
BayMark Health Services, the largest addiction treatment provider in North America, has suffered a major data breach.
Oh no, this is terrible.
Yeah.
We're talking about a company that handles incredibly sensitive information.
Absolutely. The data compromise includes social security numbers, driver's license details, health records, the kind of stuff that could be used for identity theft or even blackmail.
It's a nightmare scenario for anyone, but especially for individuals who are already facing the challenges of addiction.
The group responsible for this attack is known as RansomHub. They're a ransomware gang that's been making headlines lately.
What makes them so notorious?
Well, they're not just content with encrypting systems and demanding a ransom to unlock them.
They've upped their game, huh?
They've also started stealing data and threatening to release it publicly unless their demands are met.
So it's a double whammy. They cripple your systems, and then they hold your data hostage.
It's a nasty business. And this case really highlights the fact that cybercrime isn't just a problem for big corporations.
It can have a devastating impact on individuals and organizations of all sizes.
Especially when it involves sensitive information, like healthcare data.
It's a stark reminder that cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility.
We all need to be taking steps to protect ourselves and our data.
And this breach comes at a time when HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, is undergoing some proposed updates.
Those updates are aimed at strengthening the protection of patient data in the digital age.
It's about time. HIPAA has been around for a while, and the digital landscape has changed dramatically since then.
The proposed updates include things like promoting data sharing for care coordination and addressing the rise of telehealth.
Which presents its own set of cybersecurity challenges.
Right, because when you're sharing sensitive health information over the internet, you need to make sure it's properly protected.
All right, let's shift gears one more time and dive into a story that feels like something out of a spy movie.
This one involves international espionage and a hacking group dubbed Silk Typhoon.
Silk Typhoon.
Yeah.
Now, that's a name that sounds like it came straight out of a James Bond film.
They're not messing around either. This group managed to infiltrate the U.S. Treasury Department.
The Treasury Department? Are you serious? That's like the heart of the U.S. financial system.
Exactly. And they didn't just break in and steal a few office supplies. They accessed potentially sensitive documents related to sanctions and other government actions.
This is some serious stuff with international implications.
It's a major breach. And what's even more interesting is how they pulled it off.
How did they manage to infiltrate such a high-security target?
They didn't attack the Treasury systems directly. Instead, they stole a digital key from a third-party provider.
So they found a weak link in the supply chain and exploited it.
That's right. It's a reminder that in today's interconnected world, security is only as strong as the weakest link.
This incident has sent shockwaves through the government, and the Biden administration is scrambling to respond.
They've issued a new executive order on cybersecurity aimed at bolstering data protection across all government agencies.
What kind of measures are we talking about here?
The executive order mandates stronger authentication measures, expands the use of encryption, and enhances the security of cryptographic keys.
It sounds like they're trying to plug all the holes and reinforce the digital walls.
But is it enough to deter future attacks? That's the big question.
Especially when you're dealing with sophisticated hacking groups like Silk Typhoon.
They're constantly evolving their tactics, finding new ways to exploit vulnerabilities.
It's a never-ending arms race.
And the stakes are getting higher every day.
We'll be diving deeper into these stories and their implications for you, our listeners, in just a moment. But first, a word from our sponsors. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Cyber Mornings Daily. Let's unpack these stories a bit more.
Yeah, that Google story. I mean, we all use Google products, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to avoid them these days.
True, and that's what makes this lawsuit so concerning. It really raises questions about how much control we have over our data.
I mean, it's like those terms and conditions agreements, the ones that are like 1,000,000 pages long, and nobody actually reads them.
Right, we just click agree without really knowing what we're agreeing to.
And it feels like companies are intentionally making those agreements vague and confusing so we don't understand what we're giving up.
Absolutely. It's all about what we call dark patterns in user interface design, where choices are presented in a way that nudges users towards decisions that benefit the company, often at the expense of their privacy.
So what can we do about it? Are we just stuck in this system where we have to give up our privacy to use these services?
Well, awareness is a good first step. Start by paying attention to the permissions you grant apps. Do they really need access to your location, contacts, microphone?
Yeah, it's easy to just click allow without thinking about it.
Right. But it's important to be mindful of what you're sharing. And consider using privacy-focused browsers and search engines. There are alternatives out there that prioritize user privacy.
That's good to know. I think a lot of people feel like they don't have any other options.
But individual actions can only go so far. We also need stronger regulations to hold these tech giants accountable.
Absolutely. The current laws just aren't keeping up with the rapid pace of technological advancement.
We need clear, enforceable rules that protect user privacy without stifling innovation. It's a tough balance to strike.
Speaking of tough balances, let's talk about that ransomware attack on BayMark Health Services. This one is particularly disturbing because of the sensitive nature of the data that was compromised.
Absolutely. This is a company that provides addiction treatment services. So we're talking about people who are already in a vulnerable position.
And now they have to worry about their personal information being exploited. It's a double blow.
It just shows how ruthless these cybercriminals can be. They're targeting vulnerable populations and exploiting sensitive data for profit.
And healthcare seems to be a prime target for these attacks. Why is that?
Well, for one thing, healthcare data is highly valuable on the black market. It can be used for identity theft, insurance, fraud, extortion.
Makes sense. I guess criminals know they can make a lot of money from that kind of data.
Plus, healthcare systems often rely on legacy technology and may not have the resources to invest in robust cybersecurity measures.
So they're easy targets.
Not necessarily easy, but they do have vulnerabilities. And on top of that, there's the element of urgency in healthcare. Attackers know that hospitals and clinics may be more willing to pay a ransom to restore access to critical systems and patient data.
Because lives could be at stake.
Exactly. They're exploiting that pressure to get what they want.
So what can be done to protect healthcare data? Are those proposed HIPAA updates going to be enough?
Well, the high pay updates are a step in the right direction. They focus on strengthening security requirements, promoting data sharing for care coordination, and addressing the rise of telehealth.
Which has its own set of cybersecurity challenges.
Right, because now you're sharing sensitive health information over the internet, so you need to make sure it's properly protected.
It sounds like we need a multifaceted approach to this problem.
We do. It's not just about compliance. Healthcare organizations need to adopt a culture of cybersecurity, investing in employee training, implementing multi-factor authentication, conducting regular security audits.
It's about being proactive and staying ahead of the curve.
Exactly. And that goes for individuals as well. We all need to be vigilant and take steps to protect our data.
Okay, one last story to unpack, the one that sounds like a spy thriller. That hack of the U.S. Treasury Department by Silk Typhoon.
Yeah, this one is a real wake-up call. It shows that we're not just dealing with opportunistic cyber criminals, but also sophisticated nation-state actors.
And they have different motives, right? They're not just in it for the money.
Exactly. They often have geopolitical agendas. You're trying to gain access to sensitive information that could give them a strategic advantage.
And the fact that they were able to infiltrate the U.S. Treasury Department shows just how skilled they are.
This wasn't some random hack. This was a carefully planned and executed operation.
And they used a clever method, too, stealing a digital key from a third-party provider, rather than attacking the Treasury's systems directly.
It's a classic supply chain attack. They found a weak link and exploited it.
And it worked. It's a reminder that in today's interconnected world, you're only as strong as your weakest link.
The Biden administration has responded to this incident by issuing a new executive order on cybersecurity.
So they're taking this seriously.
They are. The executive order aims to strengthen data protection across all government agencies.
What kind of measures does it include?
It mandates stronger authentication measures, expands the use of encryption, and enhances the security of cryptographic keys.
Sounds like they're trying to batten down the hatches.
They are. But the question is, will it be enough to deter future attacks?
Especially when you're dealing with groups like Silk Typhoon who are constantly evolving their tactics.
It's a never-ending battle. We have to be constantly adapting and improving our defenses.
It's like an arms race.
Exactly. And the stakes are only getting higher.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break to recharge our digital batteries. When we come back, we'll wrap up our deep dive into these cybersecurity stories and leave you with some final thoughts to ponder. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Cyber Mornings Daily. We've covered a lot of ground today, from data privacy to ransomware to international espionage.
It's a lot to process, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that these seemingly separate stories are all connected.
They are. It all comes back to the fact that we live in a digital world, and that world is full of risks and vulnerabilities.
But it's not all doom and gloom, right? There are things we can do to protect ourselves and our data.
Absolutely. We're not powerless in this situation. Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The more we understand about these threats, the better equipped we'll be to defend against them.
So what are some practical steps our listeners can take to improve their cybersecurity?
Well, first and foremost, be mindful of the data you share online and the permissions you grant apps.
Like those location permissions that so many apps ask for. Right. Do they really need to know your location all the time? Probably not. Think twice before you click allow.
And what about those terms and conditions agreements? Should we actually read those things?
I know they're long and boring, but it's worth taking a few minutes to understand what you're agreeing to.
Especially when it comes to your data.
Exactly. You want to know how your data is being collected, used, and shared.
And what about those suspicious emails and links that we all get?
Be very careful about those. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
Don't click on anything unless you're absolutely sure it's safe.
And keep your software up to date. Those updates often include security patches that can protect you from known vulnerabilities.
So it's about being proactive and taking those steps to protect ourselves.
It is. And it's also about advocating for stronger regulations and better security practices.
We need to hold companies accountable for protecting our data.
Absolutely. We need clear, enforceable rules that ensure our privacy is respected.
And we need those rules to keep up with the rapid pace of technological change.
Right, because the threats are constantly evolving.
It's a never-ending challenge, but it's one that we need to face head-on.
We can't just bury our heads in the sand and hope it all goes away.
We need to be informed, engaged, and proactive.
And we need to work together. Governments, businesses, individuals, we all have a role to play in creating a more secure digital world.
Well said. Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into cybersecurity.
Thanks for joining us.
We hope you found this conversation informative and empowering.
Remember, stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay safe out there in the digital world.
And be sure to tune in tomorrow for another episode of Cyber Mornings Daily, where we'll continue to explore the ever-evolving landscape of cybersecurity. Until then, thanks for listening and stay cyber safe.